Parsons admin is going to click that button if you are okay with us doing that. And there we go. It's recorded already.
Yep, we're recording.
Thank you, Kamran.
No problem.
So I want to introduce myself first. My name is Ruby. I go by Justice Online. I'm a writer, curator, artist, and I focus very much on modern and digital culture and the myriad shapes it takes. Today, what we're going to be doing basically is an exploration of a specific online community, its history, and their body of work. This should be interesting in the context of engaged learning because without the institutional impetus, people on the platform are actively joining and actively creating based on the rules set by the members of the platform, which is sometimes what you want to do in the classroom, right? You want people to join in, participate, engage. And these communities that I study and that I'm also a part of, I'm not like an exterior agent, have a lot of characteristics that I believe we can actually transfer to the online classroom, namely the subversion of the usual use of these social media platforms. We're going to start basically with the foundation of Web 2.0 as something where user-generated content is exchanged, to, let's say, 2.5, where you have this, the arrival of groups, most notably in the mainstream led by Google+, but the adoption we've seen is more in things like Facebook groups. These creativity-driven niche groups take a unique space at the intersection of social networking sites and content communities, for instance, the Tumblrs of this world. Going beyond the medial objective of sharing the content, these groups serve as a platform for what we call OC, original content. The specific community, people that Aumms sometimes and are also very long names, which I cannot explain. You have to be in it to understand, but has about 20,000 members and a high level of engagement. When we talk about engagement, we refer to daily posts, or and we're talking about 200 to 500 posts, if not more, on a good day. For the gallery, to give you some background as to what piqued my interest in sort of showing the work that was created, we showcased the work of Nikki Shape, who was one of the most prominent members of that group. And she had built an impressive portfolio of over 500 digital art pieces over the past 6 years. These Facebook groups, qua communities, qua mini societies, represent interesting case studies in communal content creation and participatory art. I talk about this a bit in one of my old talks, which from a Simpsons shitposting group, where these communities operate outside of a market imperative and shift the audience from consumer to creator. This is very interesting because for people who are engaged in activities online on a full-time basis, or often, if I talk to people who are in school right now, it's sometimes a very passive process. You're watching the Zoom and then you're doing your reading, sometimes you're contributing in class, but very much so, as a member of the community, you become a creator of content, and you franchise upon the content that already exists. I quote, "The current franchisation of virtual universes represents a new paradigm that displaces the spectator from his consumer position toward the role of creator. Participatory art of this nature is interesting because what we do is that we generate new fields of symbols, new semiotic fields, basically from the ground up. There's no a priori, it's just people coming together and making something out of the blue. In the context of these neo-Dada digital poems, this is super interesting because we have what Helkson and Dusa summarize in engagement in online communities. Namely, what we see is that there's an interpretation of the source text, and the source text is the content that previously exists within the group's context. We have communal gestures, things that are understood as sort of like implicit codes and languages within the group, individual engagement, identificatory practices, and of course, there's the audience response. All these elements are present in an effort to spin off what was previously made. New person came, so I just admitted. And this can largely be attributed to the practice of shitposting, quote unquote, which is a form of posting that employs constant layered humor and compresses references that in its most intense form is like speaking from a lucid state, because you're just speaking through the references that exist within the community. There's one Twitter user called Boom, which I like, who calls lucid shitposting Delphi divination, digital divination, basically. Now, what we're going to be doing together is something like that. It's basically divination. The process will uncover the touchstones of the collective unconscious of our social networks. And through aligning the sort of techno-occult flows of the networks, these creations become multitude within a single post, basically. You know, the timelines that we frequent on a daily basis can be sort of weaved together into these beautiful poems, into these beautiful creations. And through this activity, through these activities, what I'm hoping to achieve is this transference, this process of transfiguration of the passive looker of the feed to the active creator. I'm going to share some images of the creations, and then we're going to get into sort of the two techniques, and then we will take a look at what we can do together in order to make them. So you don't need anything, as you saw. All you need is a computer. I like to use Google Slides because you can just sort of take a screen cap, put it on. We'll discuss this all in a minute. So let me just share. I think this is my Finder. All right. Do you see the screen?
No.
Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna, I'm sharing right now.
Yep, we're getting there.
Working?
Yep.
Awesome. So I believe I'm showing screen number 2.
We see a lot of open windows on top of one another.
You can see your whole desktop.
That's my desktop. Okay. Let me just.
You should be able to go to your settings and.
Yeah. So this is basically what we want to be taking a look at right now. So these are some of the creations. Where images come together and are superposed into these canvases. Within the space of the group, there's something called macros, but that's sort of just the vernacular of the group. Let's come back now. So this is what we are going to be doing today. Basically, these are digital exquisite cadavers, you know, similar to, you know, Consequences or Mad Lib, wherein you take a turn and you add things onto a canvas in a random fashion. This is, of course, based on the methods of the 1920s Dadaists, namely Tristan Tzara. This was in the description, but I'm going to read it for those who haven't read it. from 1924, Tristan Tzara, how to make a Dadaist poem. Take a newspaper, take a pair of scissors, choose an article as long as you're planning to make the poem, cut out the article, and cut out each of the words that make up the article and put them in a bag. Shake it gently, then take out the scraps one after the other, in which you let the bag, copy consciously, the poem will be like you. Similarly, what we are doing is taking a website, taking a snipping tool, choosing a feed as updated as you're planning to make your poem, taking screenshots of the post, copying and pasting them onto a blank digital canvas, moving everything across the surface, and then, you know, pasting consciously, the poem will be like you, the poem will be liked by you. I want to open the floor just because we've seen some of the images of any thoughts or feelings that emerge seeing the images.
Morgan posted something in the chat box, so maybe Morgan wants to speak up if she is there. Since we're a small enough group, I would encourage everybody.
This is very interesting. If I may continue, Morgan, feel free to speak whenever whenever you want, if you want to step in. What I like about this is that in the history of digital art, there was a lot of instruction or rule-based practices. When we think about the first computer programs, whether by Manfred Moore, whether by George Neese, or even somebody like Joan Strogan, who was making digital art, they're all rule-based. And this is a similar practice that is very rule-based. And you know, we've seen this in Dada and the Fluxus and conceptual art movement, where you incorporate all the variations of the instructions to make something that is accepted by the movement or by the group. Namely, in that specific Facebook group, there was actually one rule on the page. It's post things you've made here. So there's a dictate for basically what we call original content. So this is the process of creation. I'm going to do some right now, and I will sort of just exemplify what that looks like, and then I'll take some questions, and then we're going to get into it, basically. This is supposed to be sort of like very fun. One should not think about this too much, and just really let your digital body guide you through the feeds. You know, as the algorithms are speaking through your feeds, we want to get them to weave in and out of each other and sort of extract a new language. So I'm opening up Instagram, Tumblr, and Twitter, and we are going to get to it. And I'm going to open my Google Slides, which I like to use for this sort of thing.
I don't know if you were hoping to share with us right now because you're not sharing your screen anymore.
Oh, okay. One moment. Let me do that again. Desktop number 1. All right. And this can even be done on, you know, on a news site. I'm taking my snipping tool and as I'm going through, I am at random snipping. And, you know, as I'm going through Twitter, you know, snipping. And as I'm going through, sort of taking in the images at random, scrolling. And then onto the canvas. And very simply just creating a collage of these ideas that once were sort of separate, distinct ideas, and putting them together as this unified whole. And of course, initially it might not make any sense, but as the process continues, the sense starts to make itself. And to some extent, what I like about this is that it's somewhat, it has this sort of techno-esoteric thing to it. You know, when we talk about the meta algorithm sort of speaking in conversation with the other platforms, and it does reveal sometimes, when you get a very good one, it does reveal the sort of synchronicity in the information age. So are there any questions about what we've just seen, how to do it, how it works, or what are the implications, rather, of such a practice? So I wanted to have a sort of half hour where we all go into our feeds and equipped with the snipping tool, we go and we take and we make these collages. And you know, this is a very, very liberating process, the exorcism of the feeds. And as we do this, and at the end, I think we have like 10 minutes to share whatever we've come up with, if one feels the want to share. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Maybe I have a question on that one, if I may, Ruby. This is of course a nice exercise. It's more of a, it's kind of a, I don't know, internet doodling in a sense. You just go and look around. But I always feel that a targeted search is more productive in the end. And I'm wondering if you feel that some kinds of targets can be helpful in this exercise.
Now, the presumption here is that your feed is targeted already. As if maybe not if you go on CNN, but if you go on Instagram, Tumblr, or Twitter, these are things that are tailored to your wants and needs, and they are more targeted than any idea you can sort of type into a Google search bar. The exercise, in a way, is to uncover what that target is or what that message is within the algorithmic targeting. It starts as an internet doodle, but as it enters the sort of group activity, it can become much more, which is what we see within the space of the group. It becomes a space for, you know, personal catharsis, you know, sharing of emotional events, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes very much a safe space for the people the 20,000 people who inhabit this community. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering sort of how many times one has to sample this space in order to you know, have an idea of what it's really like.
As many times as required. I mean, from the original exercise, if we think about it, you would sort of pick a newspaper page at random and or perhaps the headline of the newspaper page would call upon you, and from that you would do your cutting and your snipping and whatnot, and you put it in the bag, and that your poem was based on something that initially caught your attention. But similarly here, when you snip, your attention is caught by, say, an image or by a text, and then it is afterwards that it is merged together from the different sources. But I'm not being prescriptive. Do whatever you want. At the end of the day, these are your creation. These are your poems. And as I said, so this is a structure from which to build these new digital poems. But the only rule is post things you've made. So you can have a lot of liberties with how you engage with the process and how you choose to speak through the feeds.
Ruby, do you work solo or do you collaborate with others?
So not myself. So I actually curate, and so we had an exhibit on the Sometimes Gallery of one of the most prominent members of that group, Nikki Schaefer, of about 500 pieces of her work, macros, Aumms, digital pictures, digital collages, digital poems. And so it was very interesting, and this is a whole other conversation, but to archive the works of an online community is something that it's quite important as a curator, as a like a digital archivist. But people in the group sometimes will collaborate with each other on things ad hoc. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a question from Morgan and also from Abby. And since Abby is on, we may just ask him to come on. What do you expect from shitposting in the future, is Morgan asking, and do you think it'll become a more present thing?
Two very, very good questions. In the future of shitposting, so as a part of my study of another Facebook group, the Simpsons shitposting group, namely, we came about with this manifesto for shitposting, which I'll read to you now. Basically, with this idea that what happens when people get the knack for creating is that they don't want to stop. Is the assumption here? You know, we are the new creators. There are sequels to variations and variations on these variations, sequels to sequels. We have created a franchise outside of the franchise. We have created a universe outside of the copyrighted universe. There is no author. The author is dead. There is no author, only participants. There is no author, only creators, only hollow words, hollow images waiting to be filled with new meanings. The franchises of the future are our franchises, which means that the future of shitposting is very much the appropriation, the détournement of these cultural images for the purposes of these niche communities. In my perception of the future of this practice. Now, the second question is, of course, very related. Is there any copyright violation due to the screenshotting? Now, one of the reasons why the archival of these online communities is very, very important is because they're very at risk. So when I was doing the history of the Simpsons shitposting group, there is a part of that history which entails a cease and desist from basically Fox and Matt Groening, because so much content was being produced within that group that at some point, I don't know how they got wind of it, but the group had to stop, and then it was reborn under another name, sort of more surreptitiously. But this is something that a lot of these communities, whether they're taking things from the internet, whether they are quite literally taken from a single franchise, are subject to. And I think that's when the archival process is very, very important. And Facebook is very, very fickle with these communities. And this is something that currently I'm studying, sort of what we call old Tumblr. A lot of communities, queer or sexually specific communities, dwelled on Tumblr, and a lot of these platforms are quite fickle and not very solid ground for these groups to build on, because what happened in 2018 is the great purge of Tumblr. So all this content was washed away. Within these communities, there are two big movements right now that speak to the risk of copyright violation and the risk of being booted off the platforms. You have A30 and N30. A30 being archive of our own. So how do we both create content on a daily basis, and also how do we archive it, and then network of our own? So how do we build a network outside of these big social media platforms where we can be booted off and we can lose all our work, all our content? So copyright violation, very much a risk. If it happens too much, Facebook is, you know, very, very, very facile with the ban button. I wonder if you could explain the meaning-making process going on while creating these poems. Are these put together with the person creating a new meaning? What could be an example of the meaning with your example? Not really. It's a stochastic or random process. Now, the assumption here is that one can never truly create something random, whether you're picking it up physically or whether you are scrolling. You are arrested by, first of all, the initial text you choose. That means the platform which you utilize. The content you will find on something like Twitter is very different than Instagram, and if you are on Reddit, it's gonna be very different. So your use of these platforms and the data you've already provided to them in them building your feed sort of creates this underlying existing purpose for these creations. And your mission as a neo-Dada artist is to uncover that meaning that is already dormant, that is already latent within these feeds and these pieces. And what is the meaning of this? I mean, there's discourse within the community, which is very interesting. As a new post is posted, people will react to it depending on how they interpret it. And that's why it's super interesting. You have 20,000 people interpreting some seemingly random creation and building new meanings as at the end of the manifesto from this appropriated content, from this collage. Ulrich, my question to you would be, what do you think is the meaning of this? Not to be all like your high school art teacher, but there is something of that within the discourse, within the conversation. And that's when I was talking about Helkson and Busa in their 2006 paper, when they summarized sort of the essences of a lot of these online communities, this idea of audience response and individual engagement is very important. And as you post, you become identified with a type also of creation. You know, you see a Nikki Schaefer post, you know it's a Nikki Schaefer post. You see a Taj Bourgeois post, you know it's a Taj Bourgeois post. Within the context of that group, of course. Does that answer your question, Ulrich and Abby? I guess there's a second part to the Morgan question, the IRL part. I'm not too sure about that part. I don't know what the sort of real life equivalent is without going back to the 1920s model of Tristan Tzara. There is the possibility of doing this analog. I've done that before. That's also something that you can print out the pages. So there's a different feel to it. You're using scissors, and I think that it could render much different results because of that, because of how things are rendered through a different medium. That's a very good question. Because it exists within the digital realm, and because quite frankly I've never met any of these people, it never occurred to me what would happen if we got into a room and started doing this together with a newspaper. But that's a great question. I will do that. I will definitely do that. Of course, yeah, and even the activity is one I think that can be humorous, especially in those last 10 minutes when if somebody chooses to show the things that they've made, it's going to be quite fun, I think, to see what comes up when you sort of like scroll through and just sort of copy and paste at random. A big part of it is humor. So if you want, we can start right now. We can sort of start doing this. How long is it? 1:20 or 1:30?
1:30 is when we're finishing going into the break room. So if you would want to have 10 minutes at the end to talk, then that's what we should aim for, 1:20.
Okay. So we got 15 minutes.
Yep.
Is everybody okay with that? We're gonna go and we're gonna try it out.
Ruby,
Yep.
I'm just gonna watch. I'm not very good with technology, so I felt like my daughter was next to me. You were moving so quickly.
I was trying not to take the precious hour we have, but
no, I understand.
Perfect. So let's just go our own ways and then reconvene and say in 15 at 1:20. And I'm gonna do some too. It's quite fun.
Yeah, can we watch?
Oh yeah, I guess the screen's already shared anyway. And you can use Photoshop, GIMP. I use Slides because it's very, very easy. But I'll show you the group as well at some point. Maybe in a few minutes. You're probably going to see it here because I'm so active on it and it's going to pop up in my feed, but that's also a good idea. And so this is, I find easier on Windows because the snipping tool sort of automatically copies, and then you can just paste it here. You kind of have to insert. We'll go take a look at some of the Nikki stuff. This is Sometimes Gallery, an online gallery that I founded, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And this was our first show. Yeah, ever since it's been focused on curating and showing sort of thought-provoking, very specific, very niche digital art. If I may plug, we have a show coming next month in October. Georgika Pettis and Marisha Sean Cruz, around the theme of sort of metaphors of the digital self. It's called No More Metaphors. And this is one of the first one. And like something like this, you know, would be an example of like a found picture and seemingly random text. Of course, a lot of self-referential humor, you know, within the context of the group. And you have this is what I'm talking about, sort of the communal gestures, these sort of things that people within the group understand. It's people are always leaving, making grand gestures about leaving. So Nikki has 2 methods. This one involves the retyping of a found text, but you have something like this, which is called a macro, which involves just the copying and pasting of the found text. But these are just like formalities of the creation. And this is always very apropos. Oftentimes people will ask me, is this just not a meme? Like, what's the difference between this and a meme? Like, why do you call this a poem? You know, why is this art? And it's not a meme, it's digital art with some text, big difference, you know, like. This is the Aumms.
Oh my.
So my initial foray into the study of digital communities and how they build engagement and how they sort of come together started with this group. And yeah, so similarly, you have the rule of just like post things that are your own or like gold standard. And there are many episodes of when you build a very popular Facebook group, people start coming to you and start asking you to buy it. And that's one of the things that happened in this context, where for a period of 3 to 6 months, a group of Macedonian marketers actually bought the group from the initial founder. And so when one considers the content created within those spaces as being worth of archival or worth of showing, there are all these implications, like how do I make sure that I archive the things that I think are, you know, great in this context. And yeah, but this is a bit different than this group, which is the one I'm referring to within the context of this talk. So this is an example of September 22 post. Yeah, you have your usual suspects like Neil. Neil is always commenting. If Neil doesn't like something, he'll make sure that everybody knows within the confines of the group. Per Magnus, done. Super. I'm gonna do some more for the next 4 minutes, then we can share some more afterwards.
I just chose a pretty straightforward approach, but I guess what I mean, I take in what your suggestions, your framework, but then I kind of give myself extra rules. So how should I do this? So I mean, one of them is, for example, that I don't use Tumblr, but what do I actually use? I just choose, okay, the 3 social media platforms that I use the most, and then I go for the just the first page, and among the, let's say, 5, 8 first items, I choose 3 each. So I get like 3 times 3, and then I put these up in a very aesthetically pleasing collage. Yeah. So that's all.
And you know, when I do it, I think that when you're more systematic about it, you have a more if it becomes less directed, because as you see, I'm scrolling and I'm waiting for something to catch my eye. Whereas like if you were to say the 3 first posts out of all 3 networks, and I refresh and I do it again, the fact that it's so constrained makes it even more interesting, because you really do not know what you're going to come up with. And it ties in with this idea of early computer art, where you literally had a program making the art. This is an interface between sort of the artistic self and how I can sort of extract something from that to make something out of the feeds. But this sort of harkens to, yeah, rule-based, process-based art that we saw in the Fluxus, in Dada, and in the 1960s and 70s computer art.
No, I agree, and I've come across it in different ways. I mean, I do music, I do sound art and sort of computer music, so I come across these things, and a lot of it is also through John Cage and his very sort of strict frameworks, but then the content is very free inside it. So that's a kind of opposition he plays with all the time, which is of course very good Fluxus. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, from Claudia.
You may have lost me now. I could do this all day.
Oh, should I like share my
in the chat? This is perfect, because I can just put it on the screen share afterwards.
Okay. Oh.
And I like the quasi-random. It is always quasi-random, and especially so. There's another thing. There's the dynamics of a group, of an online community, and you probably see this. The other talks I attended were more about like learning and engaging in the concept of a class. There is an economics of posting. You know, you want to maximize the reach of what you make, so it has to have relatability. And so in the context of like an Instagram post, you tend to want to get most likes. There's this inversion of this economics of the post in the group, where people will claim that the best Aumms, the best poems are the ones that get no likes. The ones that are completely misunderstood by no one, completely unrelatable, become the ones that are just like the form, the purest form of the art, because yeah, they can be synthesized in them.
But that's also because artists, we always look for the long tail of the distribution. So it's the odd things, the oddest things, but that still sort of stay within the frame. They are the ones we tend to promote, I guess.
Is this a community screenshot?
It sure is.
I
was scrolling Twitter just now, and I found kind of the copy in a tweet, and so it just made me think of this community screenshot where he just walks in and everything is utter chaos.
Oh, wonderful! Even with the layering.
It's very simple transparency only. Yeah, just quick fix.
From those who've done some and those who've observed, any thoughts on, say, the I know Claudia said I can do this all day. I think that it's just a fun thing to do as like a practice. I think that what is interesting to me is that oftentimes, and this is sort of I think that the crux of my thesis when I theorized this was that when you start looking for things as you're engaged in such an activity, as you're scrolling on a daily basis, you'll be like, oh, this is great, screenshot, and you'll put it in your folder, and then like at the end of the week, you'll just sort of dump everything on a canvas and sort of make your weekly poems. And this sort of moves the way you see the content you interact with, not in terms of what it means right now, but in terms of potential future meaning, which I think is very, very fun. But yeah, I love these. These are great. Let's see. I don't think I have
Do you do these as online kind of like virtual happenings together?
No.
Well, because I find it very interesting how Tamara is saying, I would love to continue to just watch you do this while you're in the process of doing it physically. So that's a whole, to me, other interesting kind of like point in it.
Yeah, I think that there have never really been events. There's been moments where, this is a classic one, there's been moments when people have gotten together beyond the scope of the content, but for very like human reasons. One of the members of the group actually very recently went missing, And people were sharing about it and sort of seeing if anybody had talked to him recently online or had seen him or whatever, with, of course, the phone number for his mother being like, contact if you hear anything from him. But besides that, there is, it's very much focused towards this specific practice. Now, one thing that's like specific to the Facebook groups is the idea of the profile, of course. When you post, we know who posts. And so people have sort of a history within the the communal memory of the group as to like what they posted, how they post and how they create their things. And we can contrast this with the sort of shit posting, because usually shit posting is very much theorized in the context of image boards. Image boards being the chans of this world, 4chan, 8chan, 10chan, whatever, which are anonymous. The abolition of the self in that context creates a flow of ideas and of content that is without ego, quote unquote. And so you don't have a similar attachment to the personalities as you do in a lived-in group, which I think is where, in terms of the theorization of shitposting, the two things would differ, and it creates for two very different communities and two different types of engagements. In a way, once you're in the group, you do not need to redefine or reassess or make salient your appartenance to the group. You're in the group already. Whereas on an image board, every post is like a first post where you must speak the coded language for it to be sure that the people who are seeing this post understand that you know what they're talking about. And it's a whole different dynamic when we talk about how to create communities that are active on a daily basis and are able to pick up where they left off. Yeah.
Ruby, do you participate in both?
I do. Let's see if we can find some of my little things. I haven't posted in a while, I must say. Been a bit busy. So this is one from August 13th. Let's see what else is there. And a favorite of mine, I think, is this next one right here. So yeah, so I'm also a participant, not as active as other members, but a participant nonetheless. And I do think that like, it is important in the study or in the curation of works from a community to be a part and understand the dynamics, because one can never truly render either the complexity or the breadth of a community's oeuvre without like actually being in it, reading, posting, commenting. And that's truly what I'm trying to achieve as I'm studying these topics and studying these niche communities. Oh, Puya sent one. Let me get it in before it is 1:30. Stellar.
the first image I found on on one of these blogs. So I was like, okay, I got to use it somehow.
It is 1:30. Thank you very much for the wonderful participation. These are amazing. These are so funny. And I don't, if you want to get in touch, I know Ulrika asked me to send him some stuff. I'm on Twitter at @beingonline, and the gallery is sometimes.gallery, and you can go check it out. And the new show will be with New Art City, which have created this wonderful platform for showcasing art in a 3D space. So I'm hoping we can all stay in touch, and if you want to talk about online communities and niche art from those communities, well, I'm always here to talk.
Thank you so much, Ruby. We really appreciate it. Please join us in the big breakout room now so that we can say thank you to everyone. And we will also post a mural board there one more time so that you could potentially also post your contact information there so that we can make sure that people can get in contact with you and also with the gallery. I think this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to reconnect one more time.
Thank you so much. You've all been amazing.
Thank you so much for doing this. This was a wonderful exercise. Bye.
Thank you. You going to the coffee room, Ruby?
Stop the recording.